Our colleague Fallon Gallagher is outside of the Supreme Court. I'm going to bring you back in, Fallon. Tell us, as you're reading through and processing this, we just got the new campaign finance decision. What do you know?
Yeah, this is going to have major implications for this year's midterms. In a 6-3 Kavanaugh ruling, the court is overturning campaign finance coordination limits. Now, of course, these limits had been in place to limit how the political parties could work directly with candidates. And the NRSC and actually J.D. Vance, when they brought this suit back in 2022, had argued that those limits violated the First Amendment. It violated their opportunity to actually work together to create campaign ads. And now the Supreme Court is agreeing with them, finding that this does, in fact, violate the First Amendment, that right of free speech, and that these limits must be overturned. So what this means now is that this is going to allow much greater coordination between the actual political party groups, think the RNC, DNC, NRSCC, all of those major political party groups with their actual candidates. So this is going to limit the power of super PACs and actually transfer that power back to the political party groups. Now, this is going to, in a political way, this is going to have massive implications for the fall because the Republicans are so well known for their massive fundraising power, significantly more so than the Democrats. So transferring this power is going to give them a major boost for this year's midterm elections. Again, this is a 6-3 ruling along political party lines, and it's not entirely surprising. It was pretty clear that they had at least enough of the conservatives. Notably, Justice Gorsuch didn't really talk during these arguments, but the fact that this is another Kavanaugh opinion and it's another 6-3 along party lines. Antonia?
Lisa, give me your analysis here.
Well, one of the things I think is really striking here is that the government itself wasn't defending the constitutionality of the coordination limits. So let me just take a step back and remind people what's at stake here. This isn't about an absolute dollar amount. This is about when you make a contribution to a political party, is the party itself allowed to coordinate with a candidate and spending money on behalf of that candidate in advance of an election? And today the court says yes. So the rise of the super PACs, these independent groups that are supposed to be walled off from candidates while they are spending on their behalf, we can expect to see super PACs diminish in their importance and to see the two-party system again rise and become even more important in the wake of this decision. Super PACs have had so much of their power in part because of the Supreme Court's putting limits on coordination between political parties and individual candidates. With that wall now gone, expect to see much more in the way of direct coordination between the parties and their sort of individual House and Senate apparatuses and individual candidates in advance of November. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say that from a fundraising perspective, the RNC and its subgroups have long had a fundraising advantage, not only in anticipation of midterm elections, but also in advance of presidential elections. I think what this does, though, is make there's a whole ecosystem in Washington right now around these independent groups that will recede in importance. If you are a person out there who thinks the Republican and the Democratic Party do not speak for me, they continue to choose candidates that aren't in the mainstream or just are sort of too separated for where I see myself in the middle, this is a decision that is going to upset you even further. And I want to harken back to something our colleague Chris Jansen says. She says when she goes out and she talks to voters, one of the things they say most inhibits them from engaging with the political process is the Citizens United decision that held that corporations basically have a First Amendment right to spend on our elections. This decision today, the NRSC decision, this is one that 10 years from now, people will talk about in the same way that they talk about Citizens United. And of course, the one final thing I want to say is Charles was talking about earlier that this is a court that sort of likes history unless the facts change in a way that's inconvenient for them. And indeed, what you're seeing here in the majority opinion is them saying in light of not only doctrinal changes, that means changes in the law, but factual changes since 2001 when they last ruled on this question of coordination, that the government itself sort of agreed with the plaintiffs, including J.D. Vance, as Fallon noted, that the last decision that was precedent here no longer retains vitality. Interesting how changed factual circumstances are important to this court when it's important and not important when it's not important. And of course, I'm thinking about the birthright citizenship argument in advance of getting that decision, because at that argument, one of the things that John Sauer, the Solicitor General, said was like, we could not have envisioned a world where 8 billion people were a flight away from citizenship in this country. And the Chief Justice responded to him in a line that got a lot of laughs at the time. It's a new world, but it's an old Constitution. Yes. Let's see to what extent the Chief Justice and his colleagues are willing to defend that old Constitution, despite changing facts when we get to birthright citizenship.
I want to bring in two more people into this conversation. Rick Hasen, professor of law and political science, and Teddy Schleifer with the New York Times. He covers campaign finance and how billionaires influence American politics. Teddy, I want to start with you because of what you cover and you know so well. I mean, at a time when Americans, poll after poll shows that they are exhausted with the amount of money being spent in campaigns, as Lisa was alluding to, there are many Americans who don't feel that they're completely properly represented by the two dominating parties. It seems like a massive split screen here as things sort of snowball structurally and politically in one direction, but the American public, the electorate, goes in another.
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't know if this is necessarily going to increase the total amount of money spent on politics. I mean, I think the distribution is now going to be much more in favor of parties than it was, yesterday. So, if there's any voters out there who are concerned that this is going to lead to a gusher of cash, as we saw after Citizens United in 2010, I wouldn't necessarily jump to that conclusion right out the gate. But yes, the split screen moment, is obvious here. I mean, the court in general is loosening the restrictions on campaign spending at a time when, populists in both parties want to see more restrictions. They want to see the power of donors go down.
Rick, the 2024 election was the most expensive in U.S. history. The Washington Post reports the 50 biggest donors have already put nearly $1.4 billion into the midterms already. So how does this change the role that wealthy donors are going to play in our elections? What do you think are some of the immediate impacts people will see before this November?
Well, one of the first immediate impacts will be on television stations, because now political parties are going to be able to get the lowest rates that candidates are going to be able to get. So they're going to take a political hit. I think we're going to see a relatively limited amount of money that the ultra wealthy were spending through super PACs now going to parties. You'll be able to give kind of something around $700,000 to parties in coordination with candidates. So there'll be much more money flowing through parties. Whatever's left over can still flow through super PACs. I agree with Teddy. This opinion doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be even more money in politics. It means that it's going to strengthen political parties as opposed to outside groups. And some people think that's actually an improvement, because political parties have a kind of brand to defend, while super PACs can just pop up for a particular election and then disappear again. So it's not clear to me that this opinion really changes all that much, other than, as Justice Kagan says in her dissent, it provides a way to for wealthy donors to have another path to try to influence how much the politicians are going to listen to them, because the parties are so closely allied with their candidates.
So I want to note that we just got the birthright citizenship case decision. Lisa is once again speed reading in for us. And while you do that, Lisa, I'm quickly going to go back to Teddy for a moment here. Teddy, if you are a wealthy donor, how does your behavior change as a result of this decision?
Well, historically, the most bang for your buck has been to give directly to candidates, but there are contribution limits on that, right? So if you want to give $3,500 to support a Democrat or Republican or someone running for president, that's where your first $3,500 goes. Then after that, at least in this before today world, you might give money to a super PAC. You might say, I'm going to give the next $5 million I want to spend on behalf of Susan Collins directly to a super PAC, and that group can spend on her behalf. Now, you might argue that you should give that money to the National Republican Senatorial Committee or to the RNC, because that money could, as Rick was saying, trickle more easily to the candidate themselves rather than to the outside group. So going forward, I know obviously we're thinking about this primarily in terms of how it affects Republicans and Democrats in the midterms. But I think if you are a party loyalist out there who believes that, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are some of America's greatest institutions. This is a good day for you. And if you are somebody who likes the Citizens United world with super PACs, it's a bad day.